Hello, Ranger fans, and welcome to this Friday afternoon happy hour edition of Liberty Blue, where I'm going to walk you guys through a Mika Zibanejad player evaluation. And I've done a few of these over. I did a few of these over the summer, and they all got reasonable amounts of interest which leads me to believe that there's an appetite for this type of long form analysis, that there's an appetite to really try and peel back the undercurrent and the trends within a team. And as for where Mika Zibanejad is at in his career, I do want people to understand that this is what's called a first world problem when we're talking about Mika Zibanejad. When you're talking about somebody who's going to flirt with a 70-point season, who plays hard matchups, who gets a lot of ice time, it is it is splitting hairs. It is finding, I don't want to say it's looking for a problem, but to some degree, when you are a team that is at the stage of contention the Rangers are at, where they are smidges away from true greatness, where they are as close as you can be to winning the Stanley Cup without actually breaking through. And as a team that is right there on the horizon, that is right there, that feels like they're close, trying to break through and complete those marginal gaps. And closing marginal gaps is one of the hardest things to do in professional sports. Trying to go from here to here, that's hard. It's a lot easier as a bad team to get mediocre than it is for a good team to become a great team, because there's an inherent trial and error within that process that you can only figure out through the passage of time, and you only get so many kicks at the can. So framing this conversation around Mika Zibanejad, I think it's important that we cover a few different bases. As we usually do in these player evals, we're going to start with context. We're going to start with ice time. We're going to talk about special teams. We're going to talk about common line mates. We're going to talk about quality of competition. We're going to talk about the defensemen they get deployed with most frequently, because all of that paints a picture as to what a player is and what their realistic expectations are. Because this isn't the case, but for example, if Mika Zibanejad was most commonly being deployed against other teams' fourth lines with the Victor Mancini and Ryan Lindgren defensive pair, you would have grounds to say, well, it's not only Zibanejad's fault that they can't drive possession at 5-on-5. And we're going to talk about transition stats, because I know everybody's very curious to see the before and after the subtraction of Pavel Buchnevich on Zibanejad and Kreider's wing. And a lot of this conversation is moot ultimately. The Rangers have Zibanejad for the next 6 years under contract. There is no getting rid of him. He's got the full no movement clause. And if you want to believe the official on the record narrative about the Rangers decision making process as far as extending Zibanejad several years ago, the official on the record narrative is that the Rangers felt Zibanejad was better than Jack Eichel, that they did not think Eichel, even after he got neck surgery, would be better or worth the risk of losing Zibanejad. So if they could only pick one, they ultimately chose Zibanejad. So I am going to toggle on screen sharing here. I am going to share my early notes, and these are very, very rudimentary here, but these are Zibanejad's time on ice stuff. So I'm going to click over here. So this is just time on ice and broken down in his seasons with the Rangers. So I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. We'll do Command Plus. Cool. That's big enough, I think. We'll go really big just for the purposes of sake. So his first year with the Rangers, they trade Derek Brassard and a second-round pick. They get Zibanejad. At face value, the trade has paid off multiple times over. Derek Brassard, very much not in the NHL anymore, had a really solid career, was a former top 10 overall pick, bounced around a number of teams, time in Ottawa, time in Columbus previous to coming to the Rangers, time with Pittsburgh, time with the Islanders, a player who was really solid for an extended period of time. But Zibanejad was tantalizing. Zibanejad was enticing. And when you look at the numbers here, that first year, you look at average time on ice, he's only checking in at about 16 minutes per game. And you go and look at the forwards who are playing more minutes than him, it makes sense based on where Zibanejad was at in the pecking order. When you think about it, Rick Nash, that makes sense. Michael Grabner is a funny outlier. Kevin Hayes is up there, but Kevin Hayes is a winger, not a center. Kreider, Stepan, JT Miller, Matt Zuccarello, all of those numbers make a reasonable amount of sense. When you think about where the Rangers were at in 2016, 2017, they go to the playoffs, they come off. So let me backtrack a little bit. 2015, 2016 is one of the great Henrik Lundqvist seasons of all time that doesn't get enough credit because, frankly, that team wasn't very good. But you go and look at the numbers you go look at the stats Lundqvist put up on that team, and he should have gotten a medal for the work he was able to do behind that team. They make the playoffs there. They lose it to the Penguins in 5 games. The next year, they come back, and they very subtly say, we realize we need to get younger. Very subtly, after that series loss to Pittsburgh, they say, we might be running out of time in our window here. We might be at a position where we need to start trying to get younger to successfully integrate talent. Now, turning Brassard and a draft pick into Zibanejad is the stuff you dream of as a general manager. Zibanejad, for all of his faults, is a gifted hockey player, and this is the type of trade you want your general manager to make. In an ideal world, if Chris Drury could recapture this magic by turning Ryan Lindgren into a defenseman, an underdeveloped defenseman who was, 23 years old, who just needed more ice time in a way that they turned Brassard into Zibanejad, that's what you would want. And then you look at the numbers, 1358, 5-on-5, 220 on the power play, and then 40 seconds on the kill. He doesn't become a mainstay on the penalty kill to 2018, 2019, but that's when the cracks really start to show on this Rangers team. That's when the cracks really start to form in the young guys getting more ice time. You trade away Nash, you trade away Zuccarello, you trade away Kevin Hayes, and it gets very lean there in those few seasons. It gets very lean when you are talking about where the Rangers were at in 2018, 2019, 2020. Those are extremely lean teams that don't have a lot of depth, that are very top heavy. You think about watching some of those games during that window where it was ugly, where their best defenseman a lot of nights was a pretty injured Ryan McDonough, was somebody who couldn't do a whole lot. And then after you trade McDonough in that big trade where you trade him, you trade JT Miller to Tampa Bay, you lose your best defenseman, you shoehorn Brady Shea into a top pair role, which he arguably was not ready for. But looking at the ice time, Zibanejad really establishes himself and solidifies himself in 2018, 2019, that first really lean season. When you look at that roster from 2018, 2019, and I'm clicking over to it now, that first season of David Quinn, luminaries on that team include Jimmy Vesey playing 81 games, 16 minutes per game. Vladislav Nemestikov getting 78 games. You talk about very 19-year-old Filipino, Neil Pionk, Kevin Shattenkirk, Jesper Fast playing top 6 minutes, Brett Howden playing 15 minutes a game, Ryan Strome, Pavel Buchnevich, young Buchnevich, not established Buchnevich yet. You talk about some of those pieces, Elias Anderson getting games, and then you go, all right, I'm going to trigger some people reading this list, but I have to do it for the bit. Boone Yevis, Freddie Clayson, Adam McQuaid, Cody McLeod, Vinny Lettieri, Brendan Lemieux, Ryan Spooner, Connor Brickley, Stephen Fogarty, Lieber Hayek, John Gilmore, Matt Bolesky, and Tim Gettinger. We are talking about a team that is in year one of taking it on the chin in a rebuild. And that's when Zibanejad gets the most ice time he ever gets at any point in his career on that really bad Rangers team, that 2019-2020 team that ultimately ends up coming up short of making the playoffs in a normal format, but because of the Mickey Mouse format where they wanted to get 24 of the 30 teams in the playoffs and they sent 6 home, the Rangers inexplicably made the playoffs in that season under David Quinn. They got boat raced out of the empty arena against Toronto, against Carolina in Toronto. And then the Rangers take weird steps. 2020, 2021 is really the inflection point for me, that 56 game season where things go off the tracks. I think in an ideal world, the Rangers probably don't make some of the decisions they made. I think arguably you wouldn't have extended Zibanejad. You probably would have rather not fired your GM and your coach 4 years into a rebuild when you felt that light was on the other side of the tunnel. But this is more about Zibanejad. I know I take a lot of asides and I do a lot of context talking about the team around Zibanejad, because I think it's really important. I think it's really illustrative, because I think Zibanejad is a really good reflection of the Rangers and their thinking at large. Zibanejad is a good hockey player. He'll represent Sweden at the Four Nations. He's going to end up with a lot of top tens in the counting stats for the Rangers for their franchise history if he plays through to the end of the contract. Loved in the community, has a very positive reputation amongst Ranger fans for being a genuinely nice and kind person when they've had interactions with him. But much like the Rangers at large, at a certain point, it's about winning. And we're going to talk about the actual stats. We're going to talk about his playoff performances in a little bit, but we got to establish the bare bones here. The time on ice tells you a lot. He's complaining about going from about 19 and a half minutes, 1945 to 18 minutes. Where's that minutes different? He takes a big dip here at 5-on-5. His power play, 10 seconds. He takes more time on the penalty kill. So with that in mind, we can click on over to the most common line mates, because this is where we can start to have a conversation. So he's played with Kreider pretty much from the outset, from the get-go, from his first year with the team. And the thing about that is, that first year that Zibanejad's on the team, the Rangers have two centers they like better than him. They still have Stepan and they still have Kevin Hayes, but Kevin Hayes is playing wing, so Zibanejad slides into the middle. And that's where it starts to get weird, because they recognize they need to get younger. So they swap Stepan for D'Angelo in that draft pick. Stepan slides out. So you have Zibanejad, you have Kevin Hayes down the middle. You have JT Miller, who can play wing, but they've used at center. They've used at wing at various points during this period. But you look at the common line mates. Kreider, a constant. Kreider has always been one of his two most common line mates since his time in New York. Spent a lot of time with Zuccarello prior to Zuccarello getting traded. And then Buchnevich gets in there 2019, 2020, after many years of being better than the options they had. You can giggle all you want about the Rangers prioritizing Jimmy Vesey, a college free agent's development, over Buchnevich in those late Vigneault and early David Quinn years. Same thing you could argue for using Brett Howden more than some of the other options, whether it be Elias Anderson or Philip Hedl. But if nothing else, Zibanejad has proven he's good at certain components of the game. He's not the most well-rounded player, and we're going to talk about that as far as his defensive value, because that's constantly cited as one of the reasons that is one of the reasons that people who cover the team and work for the team tell you, well, it doesn't show up on the stat sheet, but he's playing really hard minutes. And this is one of those chicken or egg situations where is the player good at defense, or are you just playing him against the other team's best players? Is the player good at killing penalties, or is he just out there killing penalties? Because those two things are really hard to wrap your head around at times, because you are consistently told by people, oh, he's a good penalty killer. And then you go and look at him kill penalties and he stings. He can't pressure. He can't win loose pucks. He's not physical. He doesn't block shots. He's got a long reach. Great. That's great. But Zibanejad doesn't use the speed. Zibanejad doesn't use what he should be using. And it's frustrating. So moving along here, this is most common line mates, and you can see the revolving door since Buchnevich. It's been 19, 20 different right wings at various points since trading Buchnevich. The most successful one, probably those 15 games of Frank Vetrano at the end of the 2021-2022 regular season. But that line wasn't really playing well possession-wise. They were opportunistic, counterattack, and that's one of the things I do have to explain when we talk about the chance metrics and stuff like that. And then real quick, looking at the counting stats. So the running joke now is that Zibanejad is a power play merchant. When you look at the splits, 14 goals, 27, 30, 41, 24, 29, 39, 26, 2, reasonable goal totals. These are all solid totals for somebody in commensurate with his ice time, with his power play usage. But this is where it starts to get hairy. When you look at the even strength splits versus the power play splits, and then you look at the assists as well, it's not unreasonable to say that the bulk of his production comes on the power play, because statistically, that is the case. You look, and he peaks counting stats wise in 2019-2020. That 41-goal season, he has the 5-goal game against the Capitals right before the world shuts down. And I remember reading the articles, having the conversations. I had Zibanejad in fantasy hockey at that point, and there was real conjecture as to whether or not he was going to be able to jump into that top 10 center in the NHL conversation. And 4 years ago, it was in a different place. Sid was still probably two. Draisaitl had yet to win the Hart Trophy and hadn't really established himself as a non-McDavid dependent figure. We were still in that weird phase where we weren't really giving the young guys as much credit as we probably should have. Austin Matthews had obviously come onto the scene by then. Jack Eichel, for all of his injury woes, had proven himself to be a really good hockey player, but he never really got the credit. And then circling back to Zibanejad, the goal totals, he went the 20 some odd games last year without a 5-on-5 goal from December through most of January. And I think it took into February for him to get on the sheet with a power play goal. But looking at the totals, you see where his bread is buttered, and you combine that with the ice time. I'm going to click back over here. When you go by situation, that power play ice time peaks these two seasons. 2019-2020, when it's 340 per game, that is the season he puts up the most. That is 41 goals. He puts up 15 power play goals. 15 power play goals, the second highest he's had in a season. 2022, 2023, he was able to bounce back. And I want to try and talk about this component in a positive manner. So I'm going to stop sharing that, go full screen. Zibanejad in 21, he deals with long COVID. He has a miserable season. That's the first year his extension kicks in. And a lot of people, me included, were very weary. He bounces reasonably back 21-22. They have a good counting stats year. They go to the playoffs. They go to the conference final. But that's really what opens my eyes for me. Zibanejad's performance in the 21-22 playoffs is really what gave me pause and made me think, well, I don't think this is a first-line center on a Stanley Cup contender. And in the subsequent seasons, the Rangers have reflected that. They have bumped his minutes down. Last year, Trocheck plays more minutes than him. This year, at 5-on-5, Trocheck's line and Heedle's line are getting more 5-on-5 minutes than Zibanejad because it works, because it's better, because the Panarin line, for all of their defensive warts, they put the puck in the net a whole lot. They score a lot of goals. That mitigates some of the defensive woes. And then the Heedle line's great. The Heedle line plays with possession. They drive the zone. They maintain zone time. They cycle. They go high to low. They can use Fox as kind of a fifth leg, if you will. You're thinking about a chair, and just for argument's sake, you throw that fifth leg in the middle of four legs of a chair just to give it extra support, even though it doesn't really need it. So let's keep rounding out our Zibanejad context. So we did his time on ice. We did his situations. One thing we haven't talked about yet is his quality of competition, because this is something that a lot of his proponents are strong believers in. They feel that, well, he plays really hard minutes, so he's got to be good, right? And let the stats talk. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So this is where we're at this year. As you can tell, we've only played 9 games this season so far, so it's a little tricky to use this stat when it is so far removed from the rest. So I do want to say, right now, he is playing against elite competition more than he has at any point in his entire career. But I also want to illustrate the fact that he is not, other than 18-19, but that's his first real year on the team. The team is bad. He's playing a lot of minutes. Right now, this is also the worst he's ever played at 5-on-5. So let me explain this graph. Let's go back to middle school math. So on the y-axis, which is up and down, this is quality of competition. The further up you are, the more your competition is good. It's elite. It's judged to be what is first-line players. The lower you are, the lower your quality of competition. So Zibanejad, his entire career, has never played more of his minutes against lower quality competition. But as you see, his first year, he's got good underlying numbers against elite competition. He's playing not nearly as many minutes, but he's on a good team that doesn't necessarily dominate possession, but controls possession. His second year on the team, still good numbers against elite competition. So on the x-axis, DFF, that is dangerous Fenwick. Fenwick are scoring chances that end up on goal. That's all that is. Fenwick is it is a layer on top of scoring chances. And dangerous means quality. So this means when Zibanejad is on the ice, the Rangers are generating 55% of the dangerous scoring chances. You go further, 18-19, the highest he plays against elite competition, 48.6%. He still had 50% dangerous of scoring chances against elite competition, 48% of his minutes. Then we go, where's 19-20? 19-20 is here. This is the first year he dives under 50% of dangerous Fenwick against elite competition. That 19-20 Rangers team is one of the worst defensive NHL teams of the stat tracking era. So we can, I won't say throw that out, but I would say take that one with a little more grain of salt. 2021, he's dealing with long COVID. He's not healthy. He doesn't have his conditioning. He doesn't play particularly well. His lowest season as a pro, full season as a pro. 22-23 is here. They come back well below 50% against elite competition. Then they come back after the misbegotten Patrick Kane experiment. A little bit better last year. 48% of scoring chances, 48.3 of the dangerous scoring chances, 38% of his ice time against elite competition. And then again, this is where we are right now. This is going to come down. I think by the end of this season, you will see this closer to this tier, because I don't think Zibanejad is going to spend the entire season away from bottom six guys, because I think ultimately, and this is something I was going to talk about later, but it's topical now for this conversation for right now. I think the Rangers are going to conclude at some point that their best line, as far as shutting down the other team, is going to be the Hito Cooley Kakko line. And we have long on Liberty Blue talked about the value of Kakko's defense, the value of Cooley's cycle ability, and then Hito as a dynamic figure who has offensive flair to his game. And I don't think, and I tweeted this a few weeks ago, the splits were not that different with Hito versus Wenberg. It's just that they score a lot more of the chances because Hito's a significantly better shooter than Alex Wenberg. So we've done some context. We might as well start talking about the transition play. We'll talk about the NHL edge stats. We'll look at, his skating, if it's gotten better, if it's gotten worse, if anything, if there's even a noticeable or discernible change there. So let's go over to our transition stats. Let me log into this. Sorry, I cannot share my password with you. I would like to, but that would be unethical. Pay for this subscription. It is worth it. All Three Zones is one of the best subscription services you can have as a hockey fan. So we're going to walk through Zibanejad's chance creation. We're going to look through his zone entry stuff. So, okay, now we can share the screen because I've entered my password. We're going to go over here. We're going to go over here. Okay. So we'll go all the way back. Let me see. I forget if it combines everything or not. No, it doesn't combine everything. Okay. So we're going to go year by year. And we're going to start with transition, because this is where I think Zibanejad has struggled and changed his game the most. So we're going to toggle those off. 21-22. This is the year they go to the conference final and lose to Tampa Bay. They have a good regular season, but they really pop off in the playoffs. So what we're looking at here, the x-axis is carry-in percentage. So how often do you enter the offensive zone with possession of the puck on your stick versus dumping it in? So we need to find Zibanejad. You see, obviously, Panarin is up here amongst the best carry-ins in the league. This is probably Nick Ehlers. Yep, that's Barzal. That's Jack Hughes. That's Connor McDavid. This Kucherov, Braden Point, Barkov, Mark Stone, Clayton Keller, McKinnon, Fiala, Sam Bennett, Taylor Hall, Draisaitl. This is where you want to be. The best players in the world are all in this quadrant here because they have the puck and they make their own offense. When you as a player are able to skate the puck into the offensive zone with possession, you are making instant offense. We always joke about, well, the quarterback can't throw it to the wide receiver too, can't catch it too after he throws it. This is an area in hockey where if you are good enough, you can do both. You can carry the puck into the zone with speed. You can put pressure on the defense and really make them really challenge them to make a play. So where is Zibanejad? Zibanejad, Brzezinski, Greg Keg, Reeves, Kakko. Here's Zibanejad. So 62% above average. He's also above average here on the y-axis in zone entries per 60. So not only does he generate an above average rate of carrying the puck into the offensive zone, he also does it at a high rate. So the further up you are, that means the more zone entries you generate. The further to the right you are, the better you are at carrying the puck into the zone. So let's see how that changes year over year. So Zibanejad is here in the first quadrant. We'll click on over to 2023. So more of the team is in that right quadrant, but you look, Kakko, Tarasenko down here, Kreider's here. Vitaly Kravtsov, forgot about him. Mika Zibanejad, relatively stable, 62%, 18.92. Still above average, still more positive than not. Now, we go over to last year. Once this buffer, Zibanejad takes a little bit of a dip now. About 6-7% less carrying, about 2 or 3 fewer zone entries per 60 per game last year. Now, I don't necessarily think that a marginal decrease like 5-6% is something to be particularly concerned about. I think once we get numbers for this season on transition stats like this, I think then I will be more inclined to believe whether or not this is a one-year aberration or this is a consistent thing. So next, after looking at entries, we're going to look here. Rush versus forecheck. So we want forwards, we want 21-22, and we would like the New York Rangers. So shots off the rush on the x-axis, shots off the forecheck and the cycle on the y-axis. As you can see, that 21-22 Rangers team, not a lot of offense. You look, you've got 1, 2, Blay plays like 20 games. He doesn't really count. Kreider, all of the season. Vetrano's got like 15 games here. Strome, almost all of the games. Filipino, most of the games. Zibanejad, Kopp, not most of the games, only like 15. And then Panarin. You've got your 5 top 6 forwards here, and then you got everyone else to the left. So not generating a lot of offense, and that's 3 years ago. That's the first Gerard Gallant. Looking at 2 years ago, the year they lose to the Devils in the first round. You got to find Zibanejad, and he's, again, in a relatively similar spot. He generates some shots off the rush. He generates some shots off of the cycle. He generates a little bit more off of the rush than off of the cycle. He's a little bit further to the right than he is up. Think about that conceptually in your head. That tracks, that tracks with what we have seen Mika Zibanejad do historically. And then we'll go to last year. So this toggles on, and you see Zibanejad, he takes a bit of a dive last year. Zibanejad is a bit lower. He's in the same category as Blake Wheeler. Blake Wheeler, who was on one leg. Blake Wheeler, who was not very good last year. Below average rate of shots off of the rush and below average rate of shots off of the cycle. You see, the Rangers really have a conundrum here. And then we did entries, we did rush versus forecheck. We do also want to look at scoring chances because this is ultimately what matters. If you get to the offensive zone 10, 12 times a game and you get a good scoring chance, 4 of them, it's okay. You only get in there 12 as opposed to 20 like Barzal or like McDavid. So looking at chance creation, we'll toggle on the Rangers. We'll go over to 21-22. And this should be funny. Most of the Zibanejad's right here, scoring chances, setting up taking a bit more than he was setting up, 4.3 versus 3.79. But you look, Strome, Zibanejad, Panarin, Kopp, Hedl, Sammy Blais doesn't really count, didn't play enough games. And then Greg McKegg also did not play enough games, but those are rate. That's why they're there. More than half of the team is on the other side of this, below average rate of scoring chance assists, and only about half an above average rate of scoring chances. So let's go over 2 years ago. Zibanejad's probably going to be in a similar boat. Trocheck, Lafreniere, Kakko, Panarin, Zibanejad here. So he takes significantly more, takes about 3 more scoring chances per 60, and he's on the below average side of scoring chance assists. So 2 years ago, when they're playing with Tarasenko, when they're playing with Panarin, when they're playing with Barclay Goodrow, when they're playing with Jimmy Vesey, when they're playing with those guys who aren't first line guys, Zibanejad has to take it upon himself to shoot more. That makes sense. This is in line with what logic would tell you. And then we'll go to last year. We spent a lot of time with Blake Wheeler as their most common line mate last season, like we looked at. And again, more scoring chances, individual scoring chances than scoring chance assists. That makes sense, playing more with Blake Wheeler last year than any other winger other than Kreider. So shots versus passes we looked at. We can look at high danger passes too, because I think this is also part of the argument. So we will go all the way back to 2021. 2022. Okay. This is a funny one because it illustrates how dire their offense was 3 years ago, the first season under Gerard Gallant. Less than one shot off of a high danger pass. But again, that kind of makes sense based on what we know Zibanejad wants to do. Zibanejad wants to rip it. As much as Zibanejad overpasses and tries to be a facilitator, he's a shooter. His shot is his best trait, I would argue. I think the fact that he is shooting less as an individual is concerning, and we're going to go look at the individual chance creation stuff in a minute, but I do think this stuff matters. And you click on, again, we're below average in shots, we're above average in high danger passes. He's setting guys up. That's in line with what we know about Mika Zibanejad. Panarin, Trocheck, Hedl, Gaudreau, Zibanejad. Okay. Again, below average rate of shots off of high danger passes, slightly above average rate of high danger passes per 60. Again, more facilitating. You look at some of the players in the higher tiers, Sidney Crosby, Matthew Tkachuk, you want to be up. The further up you are, the more dynamic you are. Or if you're further to the right, you're Craig Smith is funny there. Cole Caulfield makes sense being there. Who is this? Victor Olofsson, that was his career year. That makes sense. Joey Anderson is funny to see there. Patrice Bergeron, Igor Sharangovich, Kempe, Cousins, Tage. This is where you want to be. Panarin's here. That's Draisaitl. Carter Verhaeghe. You want to be further to the right. Okay, so we can stop sharing that. And we're going to pull up the chance metrics because I think this is where we're really going to be able to explain what I'm trying to get across here. So we'll go to the Rangers, we'll go to Zibanejad, we'll go to his player page, and we will look at his individual chance creation stats. Because I think this is what will tell you what is wrong. Because we all want to see him do more. We all want to see him create more. And I think you're going to see a very clear picture. So let's hit share. Let's go natural stat trick, and let's see how big that is. Let's make that a little bit bigger. Okay. So we are looking at his individual. This is just him. This does not account for his line mates. This does not account for anything else. This is only what Mika Zibanejad as an individual does. We go over here. Shots per 60. His first year in New York, 6.7. 17-18, 8.6. 7.1. The year he has the crazy goal scoring, 1920, he has 41 goals. It's not a coincidence. He has the most shots per 60 he has at any season in his career. If you go over where's shooting percentage, and shooting percentage right here, 15% shooting. You combine these two together, it makes sense why he had 41 goals that season. And this is just at even strength. I should say these stats here, these are just 5-on-5 statistics. The shots per 60 tells me a lot. And then if we go over to individual expected goals, same deal. Single highest season for individual expected goals. The way individual expected goals works, if you just take Zibanejad's individual scoring chances, but this is rate, so I'll toggle this just so we're clear, so it's not confusing. So Mika Zibanejad, individual scoring chances, 197. So 231. So every single time Zibanejad has the puck on his stick, and he puts it in the direction of the net, it goes into this category. He had 231 individual scoring chances. 140 of them ended up being shots on goal. 231, 140. Okay. 231 of those 231 scoring chances, they were worth 11.8 goals. The fact that he was able, I'm in the wrong category. I'm in the wrong column. Excuse me. This is the column I meant to be in. Here we go. The rate stats are the highest in 2019, 2020. The individual counting stats are not. And that makes sense based on what we understand about that 2019, 2020 Rangers team that played at one of the highest tempos in the entire league. And it's part of why they were so bad defensively was the fact they had Fox, D'Angelo, and Trouba on 3 separate pairs. So those guys are all constantly trying to facilitate offense, defense to offense quickly, offensive zone time. The problem was they give it back at the other end. So you look here, 1920, 15%. If you add up all 209 of those scoring chances, you get 10.88 individual expected goals. To have 19 goals on 10.88 expected goals, that is somebody who is having a bit of an outlier season. And then we can continue going on here. You look at the 5-on-5 goals from last season. Last season, we're talking about. We are talking about a player, 12 even strength goals all of last season. And remember, 5-on-5 doesn't account for this. This is different from my spreadsheet because my spreadsheet was even strength, which includes 3-on-3 and 4-on-4. It does not just include 5-on-5, so I should toggle this to even strength just for continuity purposes, so you guys know I'm not messing with you. Yeah, see 12 here. I've got 12 over on my spreadsheet that I showed before. Okay. 12 goals on 13.26 individual expected goals, 9% shooting. And this is below average. You think about where Zibanejad is at for his career. 9 is low. 9% at 5-on-5 is low for Zibanejad. So it makes sense when you add that up. But looking at the raw shot totals, that should tell you a lot. 1920, the 133 shots on goal. But what's most important is the rate stats. And this is where we can really compare Zibanejad to other players and why I think it's important to use the rate stats, because this is where you get an idea of just how much someone's doing something over the course of a game. Because counting stats, when we're just talking about shots on goal versus shots on goal per 60, we're not scaling it out enough to compare to other players, because not everybody plays the same amount of ice time. And to take you back to middle school math again, when you're talking about common denominators, you need it over 60 to be able to compare what Zibanejad does at 5-on-5 to say what Patrice Bergeron did at 5-on-5 or what Nick Suzuki does at 5-on-5. And right now, I still feel that Zibanejad is leaving stuff on the table in his game. I think that's what's most frustrating, because you look at the individual chances. Right now, we're 9 games in. He's about 2 less than last year, about 2 less than the year before. This is never going to happen. The 1920 season where he is just ripping it, that 1920 season where his most common line mates are Chris Kreider and Pavel Buchnevich, and Buchnevich does the engine work. And that's the thing. In my estimation, the single biggest difference, not only do the Rangers play at a slower pace, they don't have the driver. They don't have the guy who can carry the puck into the offensive zone. They don't have the guy who's going to be able to take heat off of Zibanejad. And when you had Buchnevich on that line, it gave the other team something to worry about. And that's been so much of the last 3 seasons in trying to replace Buchnevich, is the simple fact that defenses do not respect the right wing that's playing with them, whether it's Wheeler, it's Gaudreau, it's Vesey, it's Riley Smith, it's Vetrano, it's Kane, it's Tarasenko. The other team does not respect that guy as nearly as dangerous as Zibanejad. So some of this is the other team accounting for Zibanejad. Let's go down here. We can look at the counting stats. So rate-wise, this is the high of his career as a Ranger, 63.05. Again, 17-18. That is not a good team. He is not playing as many minutes. When you click over 17-18, he's playing 17.58 per game. So it makes sense that in a low reduced role, he's going to be able to produce at a higher rate. But of his adult seasons, we'll say, which start about here, 58.34 is a very high rate of chances. 53.5, 57.62. These are all reasonably high. The problem is, as you can see, when you go over to the next category, they're giving it back. Chances for, chances against. 53, 54, 57, 55, 62, 58, 59, 77. That's bad. These numbers are going to stabilize and become more balanced as the season goes along, because I think he's definitely underperforming right now, but he's not this bad. And then you go and look at the actual goals, 3.3 versus 2.5, 3.652, 3.220, 3.623. But this is where the comparison really becomes important. When you want to compare goals for to expected goals, this is where you get an idea of the frustration with Zibanejad, because he is able to outdo it. The Rangers are consistently able to out-create their expected goals, which tells you the limitations of expected goals, but it also tells you the real conundrum that that the Rangers have, and we talk about this a lot on Liberty Blue. The Rangers know they're very close. The Rangers know that if the chips fall the right way, they might be able to go all the way. And it is very hard to convince a team, to convince a GM, to convince an owner, hey, we might need to take a step back before we're ready to take a step forward. And it's frustrating. It is very frustrating. So let's see. Is this? Is this going to load? This website is terrible. Okay. So I'm going to share the NHL Edge website, which is, where is it? Here it is. Okay. I think. Yes. Okay. So this is the NHL website. This is the raw data from the NHL. This is tracked. You know how in their pads, they got a little chip in the pads. That's how this keeps track of this. This is the first year they have publicly available data for 2021, 2022. 93rd percentile skating speed, 97th percentile speed burst over 20, 95th percentile skating distance, 96th percentile shot speed, high rate of shots on goal. The skating speed stuff is all well above average. We're talking about somebody 97th, 99th percentile is all the way at the far end of the bell curve, better than almost everyone. I have to go and do the math with 99th percentile of like the 1,100 guys that are in the NHL in a given season. But you see, Zibanejad, very, very fast skater 4 years ago. And then if you wanted to go the year after, he went from 93rd percentile to, this website's very slow, so it's going to buffer, to 89. 96. We went to 89. We started at 93. We're at 89. Come on. We're down to 58. And then this year, we're below 50th percentile. That's for top skating speed. Now, it would probably be more helpful if we did average skating speed. So that's what we're going to do next. But I do want you to understand, we are not losing our mind. You are not going crazy when you see Zibanejad really look slow out there. You are not losing your mind when you say he doesn't look the same, because he doesn't. He is not skating as explosively. He is not skating as fast. And do I think he's entirely forgotten how to skate at a high level in a 3-year window? No. I think he's had a few serious injuries. I think he had long COVID. I think he's asked to do different things now than he was maybe 3-4 years ago. But I think the proof is right there in the numbers for just the speed. The fact that he's, he went from 93rd percentile to below 50th in 3 years. That's not great. And you look at the speed bursts over 20 miles an hour, 62nd percentile. That's above average. But if you compare that to 3 years ago, he was 97th percentile. That matters. That tells me that something isn't right here. That tells me that there might be something in this actual player that's a little bit different than just say he's not generating enough offense, he's not getting enough pucks on net. That's telling me he's not skating as well as he was. So if we go down here, we look at this. I'm going to tweet this too, but when you look at where Zibanejad was versus where he is, it's really interesting when you peel it back like this. So looking at top speed, 93rd percentile, 97th percentile of 20 to 22 mile an hour bursts. So we'll do last year. All right, 94th percentile. So maybe not the same amount of top speed, but definitely slower top speed wise. Words are hard. Slower top speed, but reasonably close average. I think the fact that Zibanejad feels so obligated and this goes back to something after that Pittsburgh series in 2021, 2022. Everybody who rushed to his defense was very quick to say, well, he was against Sidney Crosby and he was so worried about defense, he wasn't creating any offense. He was getting murdered by Sidney Crosby. And that reminds me, I did want to show this. We do have to show playoffs, and we want to show 5-on-5 over on Natural Stat Trick. And this is where it doesn't look good. I'm just going to come out and say it. This is where it does not look good. And this has been my argument for a long time. So when you look here at the rate of the rate of chances in playoffs. So 57-7-3, that's the 21-22 year. 73 chances against. 45-48 against the Devils. 52-76 last year. Then you go over to goals for. 1.59 to 1.59, an absolute push. 2.78 to 0.7. They played well against the Devils in spite of that. 2.98 to 2.78. Then go over here to expected goals. When you compare the expected goals to the goals for and the high danger chances to the high danger chances, look at this number. 21.3 high danger chances against. Look at the percentages here. 20% 21% of the high danger chances in that Carolina bubble series. 31% the year they go to the conference final, 41% against the Devils, and then 37% last year. You're going to look me in the eye and tell me this guy is good at defense when they are that in their own zone for that long. And look, you can say what you want about, well, the goals didn't go in the net, did they? No, they didn't, because they have the best goalie in the world. And as much as you might think, well, Nick, you've always said don't pay the goalie, goalie's so volatile. I hate to tell you, without Shesterkin, Zibanejad's almost useless because his defensive value is trying to hold the other team to low quality chance, to not let them have the puck for extended periods. To let them have the puck for long periods of time, but to have them have possession to take low quality chances. And I'm curious. I want to pull this up too. I want to pull up the Evolving Wild. I want to see what they have him at for his defensive value and see if it's above. Yeah, when you look at Evolving Wild, and Evolving Wild is another subscription service that's worth having. I like to use it for stuff like this. I'm going to pull up my screen in a second. It is, no, that's YouTube here. Okay. So this is what's called a standing points above replacement value chart. When you look at this chart, it breaks down hockey into a handful of categories: offense, defense, penalties, drawn versus taken, and then all three of those accumulate into this, the standing points above replacement. All three of those. I can send you the equation if you want to get your Oppenheimer on and look at an 8-variable mathematical problem. But when you look, Zibanejad's value is his offense. His defense is not rated very highly by the statistical model. Zibanejad has had good NHL seasons with the Rangers. He has produced excess value on a lot of his seasons. His defensive prowess has always been overrated. It has. Simply put, his defense has always been overrated. Because, like we were saying at the beginning when we were talking about deployment and usage, is he good at killing penalties, or do coaches put him on the penalty kill? Is he good at defense, or do coaches put him out there against the other team's best players? It's a real chicken or an egg situation in the NHL because coaches and GMs honestly can't tell you. When I watch Zibanejad try and play defense, I feel like he is always a step late. I feel like he never gets in the shooting lanes. I feel like he is floating a lot of the time, and he's not where he needs to be. And that's anecdotal. That is my personal opinion. I have not conducted a tape study. I have not consulted with scouts. That is me telling you how I perceive what Zibanejad does. I don't feel like he fits the mold, he fits the profile. You know, his best trait is his shot. At this point in his career, his best trait is his shot. The problem is he needs to be the carrier on his line because Kreider's not a strong puck carrier and neither is Riley Smith. So if Zibanejad has to carry the puck into the zone, he's going to be discouraged from shooting because defenses are going to go where the puck is. So he's got to move the puck. Then he's got to find an open pocket to get into. But defenses know, well, if we get Zibanejad to one spot, we can prevent him from scoring there. You know, you think about the Ovechkin conundrum of, oh, well, he's been in that same spot for 17 years. How do we keep conceding goals against? Well, teams have started to cue in on that. And I'm going to wrap up this evaluation, this conversation, with a very simple point. Zibanejad is a good hockey player. The Rangers are a good hockey team. The bar to win the Stanley Cup is greatness. I don't think Mika Zibanejad at this stage of his career is capable of being a great player. I think he can be a good player, and I think the Rangers' big issue is that they feel that being good is good enough. They feel that if we consistently make it to the second round, the conference finals in a short period of time, we're just going to keep finding ways to get better. But the problem with that is this league is not set up for sustained success. The entire league, the rules, the way the contracts are set up, the way the draft is set up, it is designed to hurt the good teams because the NHL wants everybody to be good eventually. The problem is a lot of teams don't take the NHL up on that opportunity. There are teams that stay in prolonged rebuild. You think about the Senators who are 7 years in, the Sabres who are 14 years in. You think about the Devils who, you know, had a 10-year window where they were just god awful. The Ducks are in year 5 or 6 of this. The Sharks are only year 4 or 5. The Canadians are in year 3 or 4 of this. It takes time. And the Rangers burned 3 years. They didn't put their best effort into those 3 years because they did silly things like not play the guys they drafted because reasons. But I want Zibanejad to succeed. If I were to diagnose how to get more out of him, they need to get him a puck carrying winger. They need the right wing with him and Kreider to be somebody who carries the puck into the zone. If you want to say, hey, maybe we want to try Lafreniere there, sure. If you want to try Panarin on the left with him and then someone else on the right and bump Kreider down, sure. But at this stage of his career, Zibanejad is too expensive to be this one dimensional, where so much of his game is predicated on what other people can set up for him. He's supposed to be better than this. I am not saying he is bad. I am not saying he is ineffective. I am saying he is limited. He is a borderline one-dimensional player. You think about the conversation that a lot of us were having 3 or 4 years ago. Would you rather have, I know he's injured and he doesn't have a goal yet, would you rather have Matt Barzal on his contract or Zibanejad on his? Based on how old Barzal is, you'd probably take Barzal. Would you rather have Elias Lindholm? Probably not, but there's a conversation. Would you rather have Bo Horvat or Mika Zibanejad? It's close. You probably take Zibanejad, but I'd hear the argument for Bo Horvat. Would you take Brock Nelson or would you take Mika Zibanejad? You definitely are taking Matthews. You taking Tavares? Probably not. It's a conversation. You're taking Leon and McDavid, obviously. You taking Joel Eriksson Ek or Mika Zibanejad? You taking Sasha Barkov? Mika Zibanejad. You taking Aho or Zibanejad? You taking Rupe Hintz? Wyatt Johnston? You taking one of those guys? You taking Kopitar? Are you taking Connor Bedard? Yes, of course. You're taking Connor Bedard. Are you taking Mark Scheifele? I mean, that's the kind of center Zibanejad is. You know, we all, and me included, hand up. I wore the jersey that's over my shoulder to Game 6 against Montreal in 2017. I saw them close out Montreal in that jersey. I was in. We traded Derek Brassard, who was old and declining, for a kid about to enter his prime who needed an opportunity, who got an opportunity, who blossomed. The 40-goal season in 1920, the 5-goal game against Washington, I was at that game. You know, you add all of this up, and the memories, the feelings, all of that is invaluable. You know, that's why we do sports. You know, that communal aspect, that shared experience, the love of the same thing. I would like to win one Stanley Cup before I die. That is my goal. I would like to win one. And I don't know if you know this or not. If you're not in the New York area, you might not know this. It's 80 degrees. It's November 1st. It's going to be hard to have ice pretty soon. Let's get working on this. Let's get Mika Zibanejad a right wing who can make some things happen. I think that'll do it. I can't believe I just did 50 minutes. That went by really fast, all things considered. I will cut this up and put it up on YouTube with a little bit less of the dead air, a little bit less of the oohs and ahs and ums. But if people appreciate these, I will keep doing one. My plan is to do one for Lafreniere next week at some point to evaluate the jump from that 21-22 season to where he's at now. A lot of it is tied to Panarin. Some of it is tied to playing with Adam Fox more, just getting more ice time. As we always say, ice time is the most important commodity you can give a young player. And when you're giving Barclay Goodrow more ice time than him, it's hard for me to think you care about his development all of that much. The Rangers have a game tonight. I don't even know who they're playing. Hang on. This is terrible radio, but Rangers hockey. Is it Ottawa? Yeah, it's Ottawa. Look, the game against Washington was a shit show. The Rempe circus is silly. It's cute. I'm glad people like him. He's not an NHL guy at the moment. He needs to go to the A. He needs at least another season in the A. His skating is not where it needs to be. They should beat Ottawa. If they don't beat Ottawa, Monday will be a very interesting show. I will talk to you guys on Monday with Andrew. Hope everybody has a safe and fun weekend.